Okay, welcome to week 5. In the past few weeks, we've covered a progressive foundation. Working with the breath, working with the body, and then coming into last week, working with feelings, the mindfulness of being aware of what the body feels or just how we feel in the context of our meditation. Today's practice for week 5, today's theme of week 5 is mindfulness of the mind. So we have to take a step back to understand that the mind behaves in its own way as well. And what ends up happening for some people is that they end up quitting meditation or becoming resistant to meditation, not because meditation itself doesn't work, because when they sit to meditate, they can do so for all the different reasons. Common reasons why people would start meditation: stress reduction, emotional regulation. You can take on the more Buddhist path of, eliminating your suffering and liberating yourself from that. And then there is even the more other side of things and just exploring altered states of consciousness, but that's not the point of today's discussion. So whenever they do choose to meditate, they do feel the reduction in stress, the regulation of emotions, the peace and all that they seek. But what ends up creating a lot of resistance for people that do try to meditate or stay with a meditation practice is that ultimately they don't come to understand the behavior of the mind. So what that ends up telling me is that they're having difficulty carrying their meditation practice into real life. Because when all of the stress of outside factors starts to drip into their world, they may not be as aware of how the habit patterns of the mind react to daily life. So by now, when we've meditated, we've noticed distractions when they've come up. Whether it's distractions from the mind, distractions from the body, we've noticed and brought awareness to distractions. On top of distractions, we've probably also experienced moments of restlessness, the spacing out of just being bored in a meditation practice, or even a very common thing is doubt within the meditation practice of not knowing if what you're doing will lead to what you hope to find from the practice. And what Buddhism would say and what the practice hopes to get you to understand is that these things, these obstacles, whether it's distraction, restlessness, boredom, doubt, they're not necessarily signs of failure, but we have to be aware of when these things come up so that we can learn to recognize what's happening. So last week we talked about, I believe it was last week, the idea that nothing's broken, so that nothing needs to be fixed kind of deal, but we need to be aware of these things as they happen. And so this week isn't about fixing the mind. When the mind starts to crave things, when the mind starts to become averse to things, when the mind starts to get agitated by things, bored by things, doubtful of things. It's not that we need to fix the mind when these type of things come up, but we have to learn how to recognize these things as they surface so that we can better work with them. And so the moment you can start to notice what state your mind is in, you're no longer completely caught up in that state of mind. So if we, last week we kind of talked about the difference between feelings and emotions. And we just might have to work a bit today with understanding that a mind state or a state of mind is not necessarily a thought. It ends up being the background tone in which the mind is operating from. So a restless mind is bound to have certain types of thoughts that come with it. A mind that is very scattered is, once again, going to have thoughts that associate with being a scattered mind. So common states of mind. One of them I just mentioned, a restless mind. A restless mind that is unable to just accept the moment for what it is. And for some of us, the restless mind craves distraction. So it'll just start thinking about other things. or it may obsess over a particular type of thing. There are other types of mind, dull mind, a sleepy mind, and it could be a part of just, having a poor night's sleep, or just being very mentally fatigued, burnt out. That can contribute to a dull mind or a sleepy mind. A mind that is very tense is also something that can surface up. And if we can work to understand these mind states and no longer get caught up in all of that, we are hopefully trending then towards a mind that is a bit more spacious. A mind that isn't polluted by all of these different states of mind, but a mind that is like a blue sky. So in that sense, these states of mind, we can contribute them to being like a forecast. A forecast in the sense that we can't really change the forecast. When we're told that the weather is going to be such and such, we can't change it. But we can dress accordingly. We can do things in a way that can help to prepare us for the weather ahead. Does that little bit make sense? So when we can recognize that the mind is restless, or that the mind is a bit drowsy, dull, tired, or on even the other sense of the mind being very tense, there are things that we can do, even outside of meditation, like go for a walk. Go for a walk to clear some of the tension of your mind, just to give your mind some space. The dull mind, the sleepy mind, sometimes it's just a sign that the body needs a bit of rest, or the mind needs a bit of rest. So instead of, getting yourself to do more, it's sometimes about coming to a place of acceptance that you may just have to do a little bit less so that your mind has some time to recuperate. So the main concept of this class for today, the theme, is what Buddhism calls the 5 hindrances towards a meditation practice, or the 5 hindrances of mind. And the idea here is that we're not intended to judge these mind states, but we have to learn to work with them. And that's just been a very common theme from week over week, is that we try our best to work with the things as they come up, that the problem isn't the problem. How we relate to the problem sometimes becomes the real problem. So in the most plain sense of words, the 5 hindrances of mind, and we've talked about them in the past. The first state of mind is the mind that craves things. It is the mind that is always reaching for something, always grasping for more. Whether that's something material, something mental, something emotional, it is the mind that, doesn't have enough, so it always wants a bit more. On the opposite end of that is the mind that is averse to things, so the mind that ends up pushing away experiences. And in the sense of what we talked about last week, it is not necessarily the event itself, but it could be the thing that led up to that event. So the example that I used last week was about someone that we know that is deathly terrified of dogs. Doesn't matter the size of the dog, the friendliness of the dog, but we probably know someone that's terrified of dogs regardless of the dog. And so in this sense, that person's mind pushes away the experience of any future dog entering that person's life. Doesn't matter how harmless the dog is, how friendly the dog is, how no teeth the dog is, right? That was one of the main things I talked about. Because of this person's past experience, past conditions, this person has generated a mind that is very averse to the experience of encountering a new dog. Restlessness and worry being that third state of mind that can sometimes get caught up in anxiety and stress, of being very agitated in things that are outside of their control, or in this sense, the mind not being able to be in control of something. A mind that ends up ruminating over things in the past that were once again maybe outside of its control. Fourth state of mind being the mind state of being very dull, drowsy, sloth-like is what the word ends up being, sloth. And that is a mind that is very heavy, very dull, very disengaged from an experience. And that could be, once again, it could be due to an environmental factor of being in a place that the person themselves has no business being in or not wanting to be in. It could, once again, be a consideration of this person's experience to be very disengaged from the moment. Or it's a person that is just very caught up in themselves, which also creates some disengagement. And then the last one, which ends up being a very common state of mind, especially when we sit to practice, is the mind state of doubt, in which we might doubt the practice, in this case, the practice of meditation. It might create doubt within you of like, okay, the practice seems good, but it's maybe not for me. Or in this sense, like the path itself of this practice seems good and, I'm doing my best with it, but this whole experience, the whole path of meditation just isn't for me. It's asking too much for me. Because like we talk about, this is a slow drip practice. Yes, there are still benefits that we receive in the moment of, creating stress reduction, emotional regulation, clarity of mind and all that. There are all those benefits there, but it is very easy for the beginner to then get triggered again by all of the things that we're trying to work with. So the moment we then step into the real world and someone cuts us off in traffic or someone says something mean to us, all of our practice gets thrown away. And so doubt being a very key thing that may come up. And so when it comes to these states of mind, once again, the main thing is that we're not trying to get rid of them. They are going to be natural to the human experience. There are things that we will like, that we want, that we will crave. There are things that we will be averse to, that we push away. There will be at times when we feel restless, anxious, and worried. There will be other times in which we feel very heavy, dull, drowsy, disengaged. And then lastly, just depending on the stage of life and things that we do when it comes to experience, doubt will always come up, whether it's doubt in ourselves, doubt in the other person, or in doubt in the experience itself. So once again, the main thing here is that when we recognize a state of mind and we name it, it allows us to soften its hold on us. Remembering the main idea here is that even when it came to last week, when we started to become mindful of what the body felt, and we had brought awareness to the knees, the back, the hands, maybe one other place, I can't remember, could have been chest, I don't remember. But by bringing awareness to what we feel in these areas, it doesn't necessarily get rid of the feeling. The feeling is still there, but by bringing awareness to it, we create a bit of space. And that space allows us to view what we feel with a bit more objectivity, so that we keep the facts as the facts. I have an unpleasant feeling surfacing in my knee, that being the fact. And then we keep that fact as the fact, not then adding additional layers which don't help us in the moment. So by working with the facts as the facts, we have a bit of space to objectively view what is happening. And the same thing here when it comes to being mindful of our minds. When we can acknowledge that the mind is feeling restless, anxious, stressed out, we can then become aware of what to do to work with that stress, to work with that tension, to work with that anxiety. And if we're in a high stress moment or a high stress environment, sometimes it's just about taking a few deep breaths. I think last week or the week before, I had mentioned something about, the example of, say, the radical acceptance was what you had brought up. And the whole notion there being that if someone says something hateful to you, the mind will instantly start to stir. And as anger seeps into the mind, sometimes all it takes is one deep breath for us to make sure that the anger doesn't wash over us. so that before we even notice the anger washing over us or entering into the mind, if we are unaware of it happening, we already lash out with anger. So I respond to your anger with my anger. I respond to your negativity with my negativity. And that doesn't help anyone. But in that sense, as hard as it may be, as much restraint as it may take, tolerance it may take, compassion as it may take, sometimes that breath that I take, that deep breath that I may take, gives me enough buffer to then not take an action. To not respond to your anger with my anger, but to not respond at all. Non-action, non-violence being the idea there. Yeah?
Quick question. There's a very common phrase, getting it off your chest. So sometimes your immediate reaction, you get angry again, and actually it cools you down because you just said your piece, you got it off your chest, and then you move on. How does that relate to our example?
Well, I guess there's a skillful way of doing things. You know, in the way that I've learned things is that, you know, there's a righteous way of, you know, expressing anger. And then there's kind of I don't know what the opposite of righteous. Pardon?
An arrogant way. An
arrogant way of expressing anger. So, in the sense of, say somebody does say something negative to you, the righteous way may not be even to then respond with arrogance, but it would be something as simple as, what you said didn't feel good to me. It made me feel this way. You don't even have to get into the weeds of all that was said, but let that person sit with that understanding of what was said to you and what you've taken in was not received in the best way. And so, you know, you don't have to then say all the other things of, you know, it made me feel this way, that way, this way, that way. I wish you didn't do that. I wish you had done this. You're just stating the fact. The fact is what you had said didn't feel good to me. And then that person has the choice. You can't change what the person does from that point on, but you have gotten it off your chest. You've gotten it off your chest in the most basic sense, but you're not doing it in a way to get back. Because that's what ends up happening. We receive anger and we want to get even. So we then dish out the equal amount of anger or negativity. But in this sense, that's not the case. To have that righteousness behind it, it is just to state the fact for what the fact was. That you said this thing to me, and it didn't feel good to me. And you could probably go into some detail of why, but the point has been made, and that may be more than enough. And so in that sense, it does lighten the load off of your mind, off of your body. In that sense, you get it off your chest. But there are ways to skillfully do it, and then there are ways to do it in a way that is just creating more conflict. And it requires, you know, that restraint of, you could always dig a little bit more, but it doesn't help anyone solve the problem. And that is a hard thing to do. But I hope that kind of helped with that.
May I say, I have heard many suggested responses to hurtful things, and yours is by far the best I have ever heard. Mm-hmm. It is brilliant. It isn't accusing the other person, it isn't attacking the other person, but it's expressing that what was done was not good. So, bravo.
And it comes from, you know, the most healthy viewpoint I have when things like this come up is that it happens from a place of ignorance. Mm-hmm. Ignorance in the most healthy way of, they don't know better. Mm-hmm. So whatever they said, no matter how hateful, how wrong it was, they didn't know better. So that was the only method in which they could have communicated such a thing or have performed such an action. And if you can work with that understanding that, you know, if this person knew better, they would do better, then maybe they would. But in expressing this thing, which is non-accusatory or non-inflammatory, you're offering a moment for awareness to surface in the other person. If they are ready to receive that information, that knowledge, then they will learn better for the future. But we only do the best in the moment with what we know. And if we don't know better, then we can't do better. And so it does sometimes take you as the person being hurt to express that you could have done that a bit better. Like, it's like you may not disagree with what was said, but it's like you didn't have to be so mean about it. And so in that sense, it falls on you just as much as it may fall on the other person, so that the future experience, if it happens again, becomes a more positive one.
The reason I brought this up is because my 2.5-year-old granddaughter, if you do something that's not right, she'll tell you. But she won't shout back. But she'll tell you, which is a learning, because then you know, okay, this is what will worry her, so you don't do it again, and that's the reason. But when we're at a place and we're talking, the idea is you do respond, but it's how you respond that's important. And then how it's taken, that's a different question, because maybe taken well, may not be. But at that young age, if we get the understanding and we teach them right, we're all better people, right?
I think it also depends on, I think anger is something that I've been giving a lot of space and thought to, because traditionally anger is come across as like quite aggressive and violent, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And I think for me, it's very much about, kind of similar to what you were saying, like the other person's actions, behavior is certainly not in your control. What is in your control is your response, and what are you seeking to prioritize or value? And I found it helpful to prioritize and value protecting my peace. And that then helps kind of dictate or shape also my response. I don't always get it right, but it's been helpful.
And I think this is what will tie into the final part before the guided meditation. The final thing is recognition matters more than trying to control something. And even in the most basic sense of trying to work within our meditation practice, we want to get to a place, and I've used this word before, or the phrase before, it's of effortless effort, in which when we're working with the breath, we don't need to force the mind to get concentrated on the breath. That forcing of concentration often just creates more issues, and it just fuels the restlessness of the mind. And so some days when the mind doesn't have a lot going on, you'll have no problem working with the breath, working with the body, just working with the practice as we commonly do so. But then there are going to be times in which one of these hindrances comes up. Some of my hardest meditations, but sometimes they're also my easiest meditations, it's just very mind dependent, is sometimes after I come back from a run. So some days after a run, the body still has a lot of energy, so restlessness seeps into the body. And so sitting cross-legged, all that energy still in my legs, reactions come up, and the mind very restless with being unable to sit still. So from a restless mind comes the mind that craves a body that isn't so restless. And the mind that craves a body that is not so restless is also then very averse and resistant to the current body that is restless. And so all of this ends up creating all of this inner conflict. You're just stirring your own pot. Whereas we just recognize, okay, I've come back from my run and I'm sitting for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. And today there's just a lot of restlessness in the body. I still got a lot of energy in the body. So we try to work with it. So it requires us to see what is happening with clarity. Once again, we work with the facts, not trying to add in additional layers or trying to figure things out or fix things. But it's trying to come to peace with the moment and what is happening. So that kind of meditation practice in which the body is very restless is a slightly different meditation practice than when the body is very calm, very relaxed. How we work with a meditation practice in the morning when we are very open-minded, clear-minded, not fatigued, would be very different than what the mind presents itself with at the end of the day, after a very busy day. Because all of these factors, some within your control, some outside of your control, will directly or indirectly influence how the body feels when you sit to meditate, the energy that your mind can actively give to the meditation, and then just how engaged you can even be with your breath. If your mind has had a very busy day, you will get very bored by your breath. And this breath of yours that you're trying to focus on is going to drift away. And that is where drowsiness something like that would come in. I have sometimes, just given the nature of my day, I know that if I try to meditate late at night after a busy day, most I can usually do is about 15 minutes. Because I notice and I can just feel it in myself, like after that 15-minute window, the body is just naturally preparing itself for rest. And so we have to be mindful of timing of day, of energy levels in the body, so that we can have proper meditation practices. Don't think I have anything additional to say here that will add in anything additional. I think all we can really kind of do is work with the practice. And the chances are, like, just given the environment, and we've talked about this a lot, we've created an environment here in which it is conducive to our meditation practice. So we probably won't be working, hopefully, with too much of these hindrances that may come up. But these hindrances, once again, aren't just limited to the meditation practice. At the end of this, I'll offer, how we can work with these hindrances in daily life, because that is, once again, where the real practice comes in, is how we apply what we learn here when it comes to the theme of the practice, the meditation practice itself, how we can apply something like that to daily life. But if something like that comes up in the practice, we'll find out. Any questions before we start? Okay, great. So we'll work with about a 15-minute meditation practice for today. Please take your time, as we always do, taking these first couple of minutes to find our comfortable posture. Whether we're seated, whether we're laying down, options for seats, since some of us have started to explore new postures, that's great. And when it comes to working with the meditation practice in the first couple of minutes, it's just about creating a connection to our posture. So we find a posture that is comfortable for us, whether legs are crossed, knees are bent, legs are extended, choices are there. We don't need to rush to create a comfortable posture. We allow it to happen at its own pace. And sooner rather than later, we begin to feel our breath. In week 2, as we brought mindfulness to the body, one of the things that we tried to observe, mindfulness of breath, one of the things that we tried to observe when it came to breathing was where we felt the breath. So depending on the posture you take, it may vary. Around the nose, around the chest, around the belly. So from this comfortable posture that gets created, that we settle into, we then establish a deeper connection to breath. A breath that your mind is engaged with, a breath that your mind is interested in, When it comes to working with both the breath and the body, the approach should be a gentle one, not a forceful one. So when it comes to remaining anchored to the breath, bringing a gentle attention to the breath, not forcing focus to the breath. When it comes to maintaining integrity in the body, once again, a gentle touch if things need to be adjusted. Now, in the context of our practice today, we can ask ourselves a very simple question. Not seeking an answer, but just seeing if anything surfaces. What is your mind like right now? Calm? Tense? Restless? Scattered? Drowsy? Tired? Clear? Content? If there's a certain quality that can be named, name it so that you can recognize it. But that's all we need to do. We don't need to try to change it. We recognize it, and then just come back to the breath. And for some of us, without even knowing it, at times the state of mind may change. A mind that is calm at one moment, content in this moment, may end up becoming distracted, restless, tense. And we don't need to be disheartened when this happens. Once again, we don't need to change anything when it happens. We just recognize it. The most important thing that we can do when it comes to assisting the mind within our practice is to return to our breath, which means that we bring our attention back to our breath. And once again, we do so in a gentle manner, not a forceful manner. Understanding if the mind remains in a neutral state, that there's nothing wrong with that. That just gives us more time to spend with our breath. But just accepting that every once in a while, even when we're anchored to our breath, our state of mind may change. And all we are trying to do is recognize this change as it happens. That we don't get swept away by what changes. But that we can accept what is happening in the moment as we breathe. For some of us, a thought or a feeling may influence our state of mind. And once again, we just recognize it. Noticing the change, letting it go, returning to breath. And for some of us, even once we name what is happening within the mind, we recognize restless mind, we recognize irritated mind. That even then, for some of us, the mind may start to stir. And that's okay. We continue to name, to recognize and label, to lessen the hold that this state of mind has. As we come to the end of our meditation, we can always bring our hands together to create some heat within our palms, and allowing for that heat to wash over your face as you take your time to reopen your eyes. So in the context of this particular meditation, maybe things were quite stable, all things considered. But just in your personal experience while you sat to meditate, was there a particular state of mind that may have come up once, twice, or a couple of times? And if anybody wishes to share, you always can.
Well, I was surprisingly calm for most of it. And then some little niggly things started to come in, but I was able to just sort of observe them and settle down.
So when whatever these niggly little things were that came up, what happened when you were able to name them or to notice them instead of what the opposite would be to react to them? What happened in that moment of you naming it to recognize it versus you reacting to it?
Yeah, it lost its power.
Which is great, and when you initially noticed what came up, was there any, I don't want to say judgment towards it, but it might have been like, if there's discomfort in the body, for instance, we might first try to judge it before recognizing it. So it's like judging a book by, what is it? Without its cover or with its cover? By its cover.
Yeah.
So I guess without knowing the full context of it, right? Yeah. And so that does sometimes tend to happen, is that we judge before we recognize. We judge before we get a fuller picture. And that does sometimes happen, but we're not trying to get a full picture here. We're just noticing. And so we were able to name, we were able to let go, and we were able to soften to come back into a place of calmness, which is perfect. That is you recognizing a hindrance that may have come up, but not getting caught up in the hindrance. And what ends up happening is that, I think a main theme is that mindfulness doesn't stop anything inherently. It doesn't stop the suffering, doesn't stop us feeling bad or achy or anything like that. So in this sense, for this practice, mindfulness doesn't stop these states of mind from coming up. What it does do is that it can change how long we are caught up in that state of mind. So in the perfect world, before even the state of mind has taken hold of you, you are able to recognize it and let it go, which is ideal, because that way you're able to remain grounded in your practice without having to go into this push and pull battle of resisting and then coming back.
There are two things. Well, one thing that I was reflecting on as I was coming and sitting and listening to you talk about, and there was another thing that I thought about during my meditation. But you said something at the beginning about you said something about failure, and within the religious faith that I follow, there's a really big practice of meditation, and it's called zikr tasbih, if anyone is Muslim or is familiar with that idea, and it's to chant prayers in silent prayer and silent meditation, and that's something that I've been trying to bring within my meditation, and I find that it's when we meditate within different practice and traditions, it's often silent. You focus on your breath, you breathe in and out. But when there's this other element, I wondered if you were familiar with it in different practice or traditions, or if you had any thoughts about share, because I kind of find it becomes, I don't want to say multitasking, but it kind of sort of demands your attention in a different way than just focusing.
So you're just mentioning like the chanting, the mantra-esque portion of it. Just the way that it was explained to me. I liken chanting and mantras and all of that to like training tools. Just in the same way that we could put on nice ocean sounds, light a stick of incense, we can artificially create a state of mind that is more easily brought towards a place of inner peace. But there is every possibility of getting to that same place of inner peace without any of those training tools. And so that doesn't diminish the value that, chanting or mantras or all of these things have towards our meditation practice. But it's just understanding that that same quality of inner peace, or whatever you want to call it, that you feel when you chant X, Y, and Z, can also be found by just nothing, having nothing additional added. That's about the extent of that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's another form of meditation. Depending on the religion and the context of it, Hindus will chant Ram, 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 Ram. You could go into any religion, there's some form of prayer that involves some form of chanting, reciting, or anything of the sort. And there's nothing wrong with that. It strengthens faith in the practice, so it eliminates doubt, which could be one of the things that comes up for a person that has to go towards that path or chooses to start on that path, is that when you devote yourself or your belief of your practice or your chanting towards someone that you revere or someone that you respect and all that kind of stuff, that it strengthens your faith towards the practice to eliminate that sense of doubt that may come up in the practice. Does that kind of answer somewhat?
It does, and like you, I was also feeling very calm going into the practice, and this idea of failure is also something that I'm like often hearing in my mosques, right, that there is no failure when you come to practice your tasbih is what we call it, or bandagi. And we also are encouraged to do it within the hours of 4 and 5.
Yep, the auspicious hours, 3 to 5, 4 to 5, it's all that, yep.
For us, it's 4 to 5, and I think this idea of like there's no such thing as failure, you having shown up for it is already, your intention is already so strong that there's nothing that you can do from this moment onwards that you should consider or could consider a failure. And so when you were talking about it, it was kind of just like another nice reminder of it. And so it helped me go into the practice quite strongly.
I've been told about chanting is initially it helps you. When you're chanting, there's a less chance of getting distracted because you're concentrating on saying that. But by the practice of chanting, after some time, when you develop the strength to actually concentrate, you may just give up chanting because now your mind has more control over what you moving it to, right? So the idea of chanting, and many of my friends here, the idea is to make your mind strong, to get the ability to control over where you're looking at. But when you're chanting, it's very difficult to get distracted because you're concentrating on that, and it's a good practice initially. Yeah.
And that's very true. It's directed focus, right? And in that sense, it's because the mind is focused on this one thing that all of its energy is dedicated towards, and especially with chanting audibly, right? There's one thing to chant internally where your lips are sealed. It's another thing to then also chant audibly. It just creates that centering point in the sense that you can drown out all of the other distractions, which is a great thing to help us in this path of the practice. So I guess, on one hand, here we tried to work with this meditation practice of being mindful of our mind, but understanding that here we are in an environment that supports our practice. So thankfully today, I think the most distracting sound that came up was geese. But on other days, we've had construction sound, wind, all this kind of stuff, right? So these kind of things can spark a change in your mind state. When it comes to something that's a bit more relatable for daily life, what you had mentioned, say, getting something off your chest. There could be a sense of irritation within the mind as you try to do something like that. Or depending on the kind of conversation that needs to be had, there could be aversion to it. If you need to say something that you don't want to say to someone, but that needs to be said to someone. So that may be like one of those relatable experiences in which you try to recognize the state of mind that you're in before you commit to an action, whether that is a vocal action, whether that is a mental action. So the state of mind would influence the thoughts that come up. Those thoughts would influence the words that come out. And ultimately, those words would then influence the actions that extend through the body. So in that sense, a difficult conversation or a conversation that you don't want to have with someone could stir up a state of mind that you would have to try your best to recognize so you don't get caught up in the anger of it all or, the whatever it may be. Some other relatable examples, doom scrolling. Doom scrolling on your phone, for most people, it comes from a place of restlessness of the mind. The mind being unable to deal with maybe a lack of stimulation. And so we crave dopamine, we crave stimulation, and we get it from swiping through TikToks and Reels and all of these things. This mind that doesn't have anything to preoccupy itself with will then find something that can satisfy that demand of dopamine. In that sense, scrolling on the internet, in which there is an infinite source of stimulation, is one of those things that can create the outlet for a restless mind. Other things, there are things that we do routinely during the day or routinely throughout the week. And given how many times we do them week over week, maybe at this point in time, we're half present while we're there. I always bring up chores. Chores being a very simple thing of you're not fully always there when you're doing the chore. Could be vacuuming, could be doing the dishes, could be cleaning, could be doing something else. Or even just simple routine tasks of eating, brushing your teeth, whatever it may be, where the body is there doing the thing, but the mind is not fully there in the body. And so in that sense, this mind that is dull to the experience of being alive in the body during this routine task is then disengaged and has drifted off elsewhere. So it does take us a moment to pause, to recognize when the mind can drift from being present in the body to being disengaged and out of the body. And then when we come to try new things, a lot of kids don't start from a place of doubt. Adults usually do. And for us, it could be a host of factors, whether it's previous experiences of trying new things, hesitancy, whatever it may be. But a lot of people, adults especially, when they go to try new things, it starts from a place of doubt. And that is sometimes a very hard thing to work around because we're already starting with preconceptions. We're already starting with our own idea. And it almost sometimes can set you up for failure because you're trying to look for all the things that will affirm your doubt. And what we're trying to do when it comes to these practices, these deeper practices, is we need faith. Like we need this understanding that we are doing something that is meant to be for our benefit. And it's going to have its growing pains. There's going to be no perfect meditation. They are imperfectly perfect. So even the most crappiest of meditations, the fact that you showed up, you sat with yourself in this state of restlessness, this state of anxiety, this moment of stress, that is progress on the path. And we cannot doubt that when those moments come up, that they are a hindrance to the practice. We need to recognize these things as they happen and learn to work with them. So yeah, I think once again, the idea being this practice of mindfulness and meditation, not meant to fix anything or to solve a problem, but it gives us the capacity, the space to notice these things when they come up so that we don't get swept away in these mind states for longer than we need to be. And that we can also skillfully work with these states of mind so that it doesn't come from a place of resistance or judgment towards them. They are a part of us and they'll never disappear. So we have to continue to build this positive relationship to these states of mind so that we can work with a bit more mindfulness. Yeah. I think if there's one thing that we can say is that this week's idea isn't about creating a better mind. You know, it's about having a more wise relationship to the mind, because it's the only mind you have. And so we got to treat it with as much respect and build the best relationship that we can to it. So cool. That's the essence of today's practice. We'll continue to explore deeper states of the mind in the last 3 weeks, I guess, or 4 weeks. But as always, if you have questions, let me know. Thank you all for coming today.